And there we go. So, first off, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come to this Prism training activity, which is the first, well, it is the second track of the first inaugural mentoring session for leading up to our Go Live training. I know that a lot of people here have been involved with Prism training in the past, and there are some that may not have. So this is going to be a discussion about a wide range of things. It's going to be, in a sense, drinking from a fire hose to a lot of people. There's a lot of information that we're going to present that's coming your way, and some of you have more experience with it than others, but we want to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. So please bear with us if you think this is review, but that's always nice to have as a reminder as well. If you'd like to go ahead, thank you. Dave is kind of driving for me today, since he'll have the majority of things to talk about. But I'm starting off with talking about things like introductions. So on this slide, you can see the different teams that are here to support you. If there's any sort of thing that I would like you to walk away from this training knowing, is that you are not alone. You may at times feel overwhelmed, but you definitely have a support system in place that can help you if you get stuck, fall behind, whatever it is. There's plenty of resources out there, and they can be one-on-one resources, they can be during these group sessions, but you definitely have resources to be right up where you need to be with your knowledge of Prism, as you gain familiarity with it, as you go through the different tasks that we have involved. And we'll talk about more of those things later. But the teams here to support you include the Prism training team. My name is Patrick Gill, and I am the manager of the training team. And we also have Patty Wilkinson and Dave Brady and Colin Turner, who are also part of the parts of the Prism training team. As far as the CNSI training team goes, Avril Lee leads that up. Kyle Beard, Rick Tangaro, Michelle Smith, Dave Hill, John Gibbon, and Autumn Holly, not Autumn Summer, which I think that was me that put in there. Maybe I was just in a seasonal mood, but it's actually Autumn Holly is her name. And then we also have the organization change management team, which consists of Amanda Yoshida and Bridget Convey. Tell me how to pronounce your last name, Bridget. I should know this by now.
It's Convey.
Convey. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Emphasis on the first
They. Yeah.
emphasis on the wrong syllable.
First syllable. Yeah.
All right, great. So those are the people that are here to support you. Not only these people, but also the people in your own groups, your bureau leadership. Will have opportunities for you to kind of do some peer mentoring as well. Like I mentioned, some people are going to be at different levels throughout this process, with their knowledge of Prism and their experience with Prism, and there'll be chances for you to talk to those people as well, and we encourage that. If you could go on to the next slide, Dave, please. So the things that we're going to be talking about today are, first, we're going to review the high-level expectations of being a business trainer. And I just wanted to kind of mention one of the things that came out of the first track of this mentoring session that I found really interesting was that I know a lot of you have been involved with meetings where we've mentioned mentoring sessions or mentoring business trainers and the process that it takes to get everybody trained up for go live. And some of those comments were that, well, first we had a few people when we asked, I'm a bit overwhelmed. We kind of expect that from some people because, like I said, we have people in here that have never dealt with Prism before at all, but they've been identified as people that need to go and train their bureaus, their teams, their areas, that sort of thing. And so we expect there to be some people that are, um, that might be a little overwhelmed at first. And we also had comments from people that said this is the first meeting about this stuff, about Prism, about mentoring sessions, about the business trainers that's made any sort of sense. And so we hope that that's more of the norm for this session and less of the exception. Um, but we hope that the whole idea of getting ready for go live makes a lot more sense to you by the end of this session. We're going to review the purpose and the schedule of the mentoring sessions. Dave will talk about the Prism activity builder process and explain what an end-to-end task analysis is and how to complete one. And then we'll go over next steps. One thing I wanted to point out is that we're not doing this in a vacuum. We have a document out there that keeps track of the different milestones that we should be meeting, and when you should be meeting those by. And we will be in constant communication back and forth with the Bureau leadership, as we expect you also to be in conversation and communication with your Bureau leadership as well. It's going to take a lot of coordination to make sure that this all comes off without a hitch, or goes off without a hitch. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Dave. So some of these high level expectations. Well, before I get into these, do I have any questions yet about the introductions, the agenda? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So here are some of the high level expectations that we have for business trainers. So first and foremost is attending the mentoring sessions. So like I said, this is the first mentoring session, second track, same information as the first track. And we will have this one, and there may be others along the way where we might want to get everybody back together and kind of do a check-in, see how everybody's doing, kind of compare notes among business areas and groups, that type of thing. But this is one of the high level expectations, is you need to be attending these. And we're also going to be doing individual bureau/team specific mentoring sessions. Another expectation will be to complete an end-to-end task analysis for your business area/bureau. And Dave will go over that in a lot more detail here in just a few minutes. But it's basically the idea of going and taking a look at all of the different processes that you do, that you accomplish as a team or a bureau, and prioritize which ones are important. And then we'll go into discovering what already exists out there that you can leverage to use for your own custom um, activity guides and facilitator guides. But again, Dave will talk about that in more detail. You'll create, like I said, you'll create those customized training materials. You'll also identify the data that needs to be set up in order for you to use the training environment to go through your different training activities that you've identified or will have identified by then. Next slide, please. So in order to be successful, we're going to be encouraging you to practice, 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 and to be prepared to train the Prism system to your bureau and or other Medicaid staff. That's really kind of the key goal of this entire thing, is just to get you ready to train your people on how to use Prism. You'll also be expected to coordinate and schedule training sessions for your bureau staff or team staff before the go live date. And again, communication, we can't hit that enough. Communication is important to have regularly, not only with us as the Prism training team or CNSI or OCM, but also with your bureau directors and where you're at with your different activities and what questions that you may have. If you've run into roadblocks, again, we are here to help you out with that. So Dave, next slide, please. So this is the purpose and the schedule of the mentoring sessions. So again, the purpose of the mentoring sessions is to help you be successful trainers. And we've got a lot of different activities, a lot of different tips and tricks, things that we'll be going over with you as larger groups or as individual sessions. These mentoring sessions will continue throughout the year, leading up to go live. I think our last mentoring session is tentatively expected to be in October, which will give you time to do your go live training with your people. Next, do we have, oh, one thing I wanted, well, if I didn't just lose my train of thought, which I think I did. And if I think about it, I'll interrupt somebody and bring it up later. But does anybody have any questions so far about what we kind of expect from the business trainers? And again, a lot of this information will come throughout the rest of the discussion, but go ahead.
Hi, this is Audra with, the Office of Long-Term Services and Supports is like the new name, but I am curious, the end-to-end task analysis is going to be our training for, our people that we work with, or the providers that we work with, or whatever it may be. Is there other trainings, like we have those modules? There's different trainings.
Right. And that's exactly right. We're going to have basically a menu of different trainings that either exist currently that we've done in e-learning and exist in Saba, our learning management system. We have recorded UAT training sessions. We have recorded demos that CNSI has done for us over the months. And we'll have things that need to be created. So there are a lot of different places for you to leverage what already exists into your activity guides once you've looked at what are my most important end-to-end processes that I need to train my people how to do in Prism. Does that make sense? And did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Patrick, can I just mention that those individual bureau mentoring sessions that Patrick was talking about, you should have received an invite, and those will be the last week of February and the first week of March. So if you did not receive an invite to that, will you please instant message me?
Thank you, Patty.
Hey, Patrick, is your PowerPoint going to be available?
Yes, we'll have the PowerPoint available. We'll have this meeting and or the other meeting, or a combination of both, recorded and out there for all attendees to be able to, or all invitees, we'll say, to be able to watch over again if they need reminders, or it's also there for people that weren't able to attend either of the tracks of this first mentoring session. But yes, they will be recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I turn the time over to Dave? Nope. All right, take it away, Dave. Not take it fully away, but make it go away, Dave.
I'm running away with it all. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's the last day of January, so hopefully everybody's having a lovely last day of January as we're moving closer to spring. That will be nice. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? Is it good? Okay. All right. So I'm going to be talking about building Prism training materials and some of the ways that we can get to the point where we feel comfortable building Prism training materials. Ultimately, as a training team, we would have loved to been able to do all of that, but you yourselves know your business processes way better than we do. And so we want to be able to support you and help you build some of that training materials that make sense for your individual business processes within your bureaus. So we're going to be talking about that, as well as focusing, like we mentioned, the end-to-end task analysis. But the ultimate goal really is to have useful, specific, and job relevant classroom materials and experiences for the training participants, for your training participants. And this is really achieved by having customized activity guides and facilitator guides. Customized really meaning very specific to your team and the processes that you use, and the scenarios would make sense to your training participants. And the added benefit when you go through and you create your own training materials is, as you're doing that, you'll recognize that some of these can be converted, if not all of them, converted into standard operating procedures. When we went through release 3 with provider enrollment and then moved to the cloud for C1 for provider enrollment, the provider enrollment team went through this experience of recognizing that they had to create a lot of standard operating procedures that weren't necessarily, of course, covered in any Prism training materials or even in the design, because some of the existing business processes they had need to be converted over to the new ones, and it wasn't really necessarily identified anywhere else other than recognizing when they are in the throes of release 3 and C1 that they had to document a lot of their procedures. We're hoping that by identifying some of these training activities that might help get you a head start on documenting some of your SOPs for your own bureau. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the UAT training materials that were used this past summer. They were designed by CNSI to have to really demonstrate overall system functionality. They weren't really designed to address specific scenarios that they would address in the classroom. They were more of a global system functionality. But the other thing that we really want to have happen in the classroom is that your training participants, when they're going through these training activities, they can relate to them and see that they would be applicable to when we go into Prism Live, and that those training activities had real life application to what they would be doing in the future. And so you might wonder what an activity guide, a Prism training activity guide is. And it's a guide that has all of the information a training participant needs to complete a very specific end-to-end Prism training activity. And so why are we using those? It reduces the chance of a training participant becoming lost or frustrated during the classroom experience. You know, it would be really, really nice if we could all be in the same room together again at some point. And that's the way we used to conduct training back in release 3 specifically. And when you were in the classroom like that all together, we would have additional trainers or additional system experts wander the classroom and help people who got stuck, and trying to keep the flow of the training experience moving right along. Sometimes you, of course, have to stop the class to make sure that we can get someone caught up because of maybe a system problem or some other way they got lost. And so an activity guide could help reduce the chances of someone getting lost or frustrated. And so they have to be specific and easy to follow when you're going through a training activity. Now, that's not to say that we still wouldn't, you know, have people get confused or lost or other system problems. But if we can have those activity guides as helpful and specific as possible, it will reduce the chances of someone becoming lost during the training activity. The other nice thing, of course, is if someone does get stuck, we can always have them share their screen and as a classroom experience, see where they got stuck and learn from even that experience. Yes, so when we're training remotely, having good training material that's easy to follow is super important. I just want to mention that if anyone has a question, feel free to raise your hand or even type your question in the chat, and we'll try to answer your question the best way that we can. But what I've done here is I have created a screenshot of what an activity guide looks like, and I just kind of want to go through the parts of an activity guide and what it kind of looks like based on really the template that CNSI created for their activity guide. So we're leveraging their template of the activity guides they used during UAT. So first off, of course, we have the activity name, and this is an example of an activity guide I helped recently create, which is initiating and approving a new PA request by a DHS custody medical care worker. So we have identified what the activity is, and then the next little area is called scenario information. I always struggled with using the word activity and the word scenario interchangeably when talking about an activity guide. So I'm really trying to differentiate between an overall activity guide versus what the scenario information is. And so for me, really, the scenario is we're just trying to set up what the current situation is and how we're going to process information and what the objectives are that we're hoping to achieve in that scenario information. So the example here is the DHS custody medical care worker has a foster care child who has either not yet been determined eligible for Medicaid or is eligible for Medicaid and they need a non-covered service. And so the child needs medical services for dental non-covered benefit of nitrous oxide. And so the final portion of this really says that the CMC worker enters all the required PA information into Prism, and in addition, they approve the PA. So this is, a different scenario than, say, a provider submitting a PA. This is a Department of Human Services custody medical care worker not only submitting a PA request, but also they themselves are approving that PA request. Then kind of going down the rest of this document, we have a training environment URL for the training environment that's listed there. A question was brought up in our last session is, okay, what happens if your URL changes for the Prism training environment? We don't anticipate that happening. We're hoping that URL stays the same, but if it doesn't, we would still have a location where the training environment URL would be easy to locate, or other processes to make sure people bookmark the training environment URL before they go to the class. The other aspects of this document is what domain and profile they would be using. When it comes to selecting domain, anything that's a state user, of course, will have the Utah domain. In some situations, we are actually going to have activities where you'll be logging in as a provider. And so we would have the name of the provider attached to your training environment where you can log in as a provider, and then also selecting the appropriate profile. And we know there's a lot of questions about there. How do I know which profile to use? And a lot of those types of questions will be answered in the future. But when you are testing certain activities and have questions about what profile to use, we as a training team, others can help you figure out which profile it is that you're supposed to be using for that particular activity. In some instances like this, even this activity, it took me a while and getting help from business analysts and others to know which profile I should be using for this particular activity. and we will work through those types of things together as we need to answer some of those questions. The other thing I've done with this activity guide is really kind of broken it down by a table per page or a table per step, because with prior authorization, there's a lot of steps that are really on the same page as you're scrolling down. And the other thing that you can do with an activity guide is you can leverage it the way you want to. So rather than saying step, you can insert page, or you can insert anything else there that makes sense based on the activity. All of these things are suggested and are not meant to be like really rigid in that you have to do it the way that we're suggesting. It's just, these are suggestions that we have, but you can also leverage these activity guides to what makes sense for the activity or the part of the system that you're in, whether it's in Pega, whether it's you're in Prism or any other subsystem area. And so then we have this activity guide broken down by tables, like I mentioned, but on the left side of the tables, we'll have what field you should be looking for or drop down, or those fields that are required on the left side of that table. But on the right side, we would have the information and data that the training participant will need to enter when they're actually following this activity in the system. And I have another screenshot of page 2 for this particular activity. If you have like unique data that needs to be entered into the activity, say like a beneficiary ID or an NPI, you can supply that data right in your activity guide. Or if you have a lot of people that you're training, what CNSI did during the UAT training is they supplied spreadsheets and had columns that were assigned to each unique training participant for the data that is assigned to them. If you only have a few people you're training, it might be easier to supply your data directly in the activity guide, or if you're training a lot of people, an additional document that's in a spreadsheet that has data that is specific for that particular training participant. So that's really kind of a high level look at activity guides in a nutshell. I went through that fairly fast, but what kind of questions does that bring up for you?
Is there going to be a template, something similar to this that we're going to use?
Yeah, good question. A little bit later in the presentation, I will actually show you where those templates are located. Right now, I do have a blank activity guide that can be leveraged, but our hope is that as more and more of these activities are completed and are shared in those different SharePoint folders, you'll be able to see more and more examples of those particular activities as you create them, as maybe we get a chance to create them. But yes, there's blank templates, and we also want to have examples that you can follow and test as well, so that you kind of see how those work. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other question? We were joking that we didn't know how many people would show up to this because we had over 40 on Friday, and it looked like we have this almost the same amount of people here today as we do on Friday. So we appreciate that. Okay, so there isn't any questions. We'll just move right along our presentation. So really, I wanted to kind of give an overview of an activity guide first. To me, the activity guide is probably one of the most important training documents that could be created, because from there, as you're going through the activity guide and trying to figure out what data to use or what a particular field is for, you can document questions right in your own activity guide so that you can follow up with someone else if you can't find the answers yourself. But not only that, the activity guides then are leveraged to the point where you will be able to put that information in your facilitator guide and put even more detail in your facilitator guide about certain functionality of the system that you don't necessarily want to put in the activity guide, because the facilitator guide would be for you to refer to for your notes when you're training your coworkers. Okay, so this is a lovely graphic we made for the Prism activity builder process. And the first one is really assessing teamwork tasks. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more here in the next few minutes. Assess the existing activity and facilitator guides. And when I say assess activity and facilitator guides, I'm talking about the UAT activity and facilitator guides that were used this past summer that CNSI used to train us on the system. And so you can, there's going to be an activity where you can assess what's in those, see what's usable, see what's not, see what needs to be added to it, etc. And then create and test your activity and facilitator guides, and then practice. Really the question in last Friday's session, someone was asking, well, when I was looking at the training material in my area, it looked like it pretty much had what I needed. If that's the case, that particular activity guides and facilitator guides contained what you needed to train your team, then great. But if it needed more, that's what the purpose of this particular process is for you to be able to assess what you need additionally to be successful in the classroom. So the first step in that Prism activity builder process is to really assess your teamwork tasks. And that can be accomplished many different ways, but I've listed a few on this next slide to talk about some assessment activities that you can go through. I've identified 4, but there can be more assessment activities when it comes to your work tasks. The first one is perform an end-to-end task assessment. I will be going into more detail about that here in a minute, but that's one example of an assessment. Another one is to assess your current business procedures. A lot of those current business procedures that you have, may not translate super well into a Prism business procedure, but that's a place to start sometimes where you can evaluate what is the equivalent of this particular business procedure, what's the equivalent Prism business procedures. And that's a way to make sure that you can identify any gaps in your knowledge and be able to translate that into trying to find what the equivalent Prism business procedure is. Evaluate OCM change alerts and action items. I know there's several OCM change alerts and action items out there that have been identified that can be incorporated into an activity guide based on the fact that, hey, this is going to be an important change in our particular business processes. Let's go out, evaluate those, and see how we can incorporate those in the classroom. And the other one is evaluating existing UAT test cases. In a lot of instances, the UAT test cases have some end-to-end types of scenarios where you can leverage those test cases and put those into an activity guide, and that will help save on some of your work is by looking at those UAT test cases. Some of you, have been doing a lot of UAT testing and know what that process looks like and have learned from that. But also the documented UAT test cases can be a great place to start as far as identifying a scenario that you want to work through in the Prism system. But before I forget, I want to take just another moment to discuss kind of your unique team situations. Some people might be in charge of just themselves as far as, okay, this particular work task that I have in the system I'm the only one that currently does that, and I might have a backup. And so I'm really responsible for documenting, these business processes and on all of that as far as Prism is concerned, and, training my backup. Some of you might have a team of 4 or 5 that you might have to train, that you're responsible for training them, and you all kind of do a similar activity in the system. I know that some trainers are responsible for training other teams or even people outside of our department, say in our sister agencies like DWS or DHS, that you have to know kind of some of the activities they perform in the Prism system, and you're ending up having to train them. So in a lot of instances, you might know what your tasks are going to be in the system, kind of at a high level, but you might also be responsible for training other people, and you're not maybe as familiar with some of their tasks in the system. Does anybody have any unique situation when it comes to training that you'd kind of like to tell us about?
Dave, let me just
Yeah, Debbie.
interject what I think here. Hi, Dave.
Debbie.
Would be at some point, provider enrollment is going to need to know how to walk through a claim to be able to help providers when they call us to see why a claim denied, to help out customer service. Well, we currently have absolutely no training in how to work through claims and where to find ERGs and those kinds of things. So that's going to be a little bit unique for our team to be able to create the activity builder and do an end-to-end, because we're going to have to partner with someone from claims to help us create all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we actually had a few comments like that last Friday, as far as, we would have some crossover from bureau to bureau, and who's actually responsible, for creating some of those activities for training. And so that's going to take a little bit of collaboration. And when we get to this point, we actually, Patrick has created a question tracker, and we might be able to leverage that question tracker as far as, okay, here, as provider enrollment, we know that we have to answer these questions about claims. Who's going to help us learn some of these, ways to look at claims in the system? So that might be one way to track it, and then so we can follow up, so we're not missing some of those types of training activities. Is there other suggestions? Yes, Patty.
Yes. So Vicky and Mary had a conversation about this last week, and what they wanted to do is, if I'm creating something for claims, why does another bureau have to create it? So they're not just constantly reinventing the wheel or doing double duty on activity guides. So they were just talking about how communication between bureaus is going to be so important. But I'll add this also, your question as well, because if there's something out there for you, Debbie, there's no need for you to create it again, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Good question. Does that help, Debbie?
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, or anyone else kind of wanted to bring up a similar type of situation they're in when it comes to who you're training or whose responsibility it is?
Can I give you one more question that was brought up, Dave?
Yeah, of course.
Another question that was brought up by Anne Granado, and I don't know if you guys want to know the names, but she was wondering who's going to be creating these facilitator guides and activity guides. If there isn't one that is out there already, that is something that they need. So do you want to answer that question for these folks, Dave?
Well, yeah, and I think in Anne's situation, when we went through UAT, when she went through UAT specifically for her area, it sounded like she felt comfortable with the fact that that facilitator guide, those activity guides would suffice for her. But that's not necessarily the case for every bureau or every team, where you might not even had UAT training activities that even addressed your particular things that you do in the system. So in that situation, you know, where that might be lacking, then you as a trainer for your bureau or team would have to go through this process of trying to identify what it is that you need to train your coworkers, because maybe it was sparse, or there wasn't enough material there for you to leverage to complete a training for your team. So it really can be all over the board, from, hey, I feel comfortable with this because it gave me what I needed, and if I need to add a little bit more, I can, versus you may not have as much information in there as you want. That's why you have to go through this process of building these activities. Does that answer your question, Patty? Or were you looking for something
I
else?
was just for you to let the bureaus know here, because there are some folks that their facilitator guides do not address their particular needs.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be all over the board. So we've created these task analysis tools to keep track, document, and prioritize teamwork tasks. The documents are available in Word, fillable PDF, and Excel versions. Let me just talk about the first one that we've created. Well, really, it's the main one that we created. The other one is just kind of designed to document the answers you get from this task analysis list. But we asked Summer Bradbury to volunteer and to test this document for us, because Summer's situation is that she is in charge of training some people from DWS, and I believe some people from DHS, and in a lot of those instances, she doesn't even know exactly what they use MMCS or other existing systems for. And so she went through the process of sending this task analysis list out to those whom she was going to be training, not only within her bureau and team, but also outside of her bureau and team with DWS and DHS. And she helped us to simplify this document a little bit, but it was really designed to have people list their most important work tasks. And then once those work tasks are submitted back to Summer, then she was going to go through the process to decide whether or not this was going to be in activity in go live training, or whether it just needs to be a process that is documented for a standard operating procedure. We had this frequency legend here that tries to help identify those tasks that are occurring frequently, like hourly to many times each hour. They would put 4 in the frequency column. If it's every few hours to daily, they'd put a 3. Every few days to weekly, they'd put in a 2, and then 1 for every few weeks to monthly, and they'd put in their name and their bureau. And we asked them for those tasks and try to include as much detail as possible about that task and potentially what the data they might need. So she distributed that to these people with a reasonable deadline, of course. And if you are sending it out and you need our help crafting verbiage for sending that email out to your team, we can do that for you. But I wanted to show you just one example, if I can find it, of the response that she had come back. So this one? Yeah, I think it's that one. Better check, make sure that was, oh, sorry. I can drive, maybe. This was an example of a response she got back from someone from DWS. And one of the things she does hourly, too many times each hour, is check a pregnancy indicator so that she doesn't have to ask DOH workers if this is now showing, as it doesn't show in MMCS for them. And she said that she needed this daily. And then checking for HMOs, she said they do that every few days to weekly, and then ensuring benefits have been issued and batched properly every few days to weekly. So she used this this particular document, which this one is a fillable PDF. The only place they could actually enter information was in these columns. That way, there wasn't a lot of problems with her sending out a Word document. She used this fillable PDF. Then when the responses started coming back in, she used another document, which we currently have. Let's see. I'm sorry, people. I will try to bring that back up. This particular spreadsheet, where she would then document all of her responses. We created an Excel spreadsheet, but Summer actually put this in a Google Sheet, is the way she handled it. And again, it's just an example of when you're going through some of these processes, you can handle it the way that you want to. But you can see down here at the bottom of this sheet, she had lots of different areas where she was trying to document some of the tasks that are occurring in each of these areas where she's the responsible trainer. And then once she entered that, then she could kind of prioritize what she thought was some of the more important things that she'll be developing activities for in Prism. And medical review board, this is an example of some of her responses, is log cases and assign to an examiner, pull client into the system. A lot of these processes will be different, in Prism than they are currently, but she can do the analysis to see what it is now, what it's going to be in Prism versus what it is currently, so that she can address those changes that the people she's training are going to be experiencing. What kind of questions does this bring up?
Well, I can tell you that one thing Summer, I'll just add to what you were saying, Dave, is one thing that Summer noticed was things that she didn't realize some of her team was doing. So that brought up a lot of things that they weren't doing. And then this document made it easier for her to decide what she wanted to train.
Yeah, good point, Patty. I actually forgot to bring that up. That's a great point. That it was eye-opening for her, that she didn't realize that some of these people outside in these other departments use the system for this other thing that she wasn't even aware. Again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, all this depends on your unique situation as a trainer and how much detail you might need from others versus everything's already pretty much documented in your standard operating procedures. Yeah. Okay, let me bring this back up. So again, that's an example of the spreadsheet, and the question was, okay, where are these? And we'll be getting to that in a little bit. But yes, these documents will be available for each bureau and team to use them as you need. Okay, so assessing teamwork tasks. I mentioned those 4 assessment activities you can do. There is really no set way to do this, but whatever tools you use to help you figure out anything that you feel is a gap in any of the activities that you might need to develop for your team. The second step is really to assess the activity and facilitator guides, and those are the UAT activity and facilitator guides. So I'm just going to take a moment here to show you where those are at currently. Sorry, I'm having a hard time driving today for some reason. When you come into the Prism SharePoint page, and this is the SharePoint homepage for the Prism site, if you go into the training tab and just click on that, it'll bring up this very colorful, lovely menu of options. And the one that probably you'll be using the most is this Business Trainer Documents and Resources. We have several folders here, and one of them is the C3 Training Resources. And within that C3 Training Resources folder, you'll see all of the different subsystem folders. And this is where all of the UAT facilitator guides and activity guides are. And you'll notice here where it says FG, of course, that's a facilitator guide, and then a PowerPoint associated with that, and then the activity guide. So these are the documents that you will be analyzing and seeing what's there, what's missing, how much can you leverage those existing UAT activity and facilitator guide. Is it enough, or is it have a lot of spaces that are blank as far as your particular business processes are and the things that you want to train? But I think it is an important step in seeing what's there, what can be leveraged, what needs to be improved. And what I did here is just to kind of reiterate where those are at under Business Trainer Documents and Resources, under C3 Training Resources, and then all of the different subsystems that have the associated activity guides and facilitator guides within each of those folders. Let me just emphasize that what I generally do when I work with any of these facilitator guides or activity guides, don't feel afraid just to get in there and create your own version of it and start just marking it up, working with it, deciding what should be included in your training material. Go ahead and just rename, or not rename, but just create a new name of a particular facilitator guide and just start dissecting it and going through it and figuring out what parts of it you want to use, what's parts that may not work super well, because as I mentioned earlier, it might be more generic in nature when it's going through it and trying to describe the system. The other thing I'll say is that the facilitator guides do have a lot of good information about it as far as overviews, and in some instances some really good information about specific fields, but you might find gaps where the facilitator guide doesn't really give me enough information about this particular functionality on this page or this particular field on this page. There's not enough information. That's where you'd have to do some research or reach out for some help if you can't figure out the answer to that question about what a specific field or a particular functionality is in the Prism system. Okay. So read through the facilitator and activity guide and assess the following. Can any of the existing activities be modified and leveraged to match team tasks? What business process changes are needed for our team? Have they already been identified? Are there manual processes that are now automated? What processes are automated but now manual? What questions has my assessment produced? I'll guarantee you that you'll have a lot of questions as you're going through any activity and you're testing it in the system. You'll hit roadblocks. So it's important to document your roadblocks and ask questions and find out why you're getting stopped at a certain location. In my own situation, sometimes it's just because I didn't understand the design well, or I was actually going through that activity incorrectly, or Yeah, I was misunderstanding something. That will happen, but that process actually helps you learn and grow and understand more about that system as you go through that. Sometimes it can be painful, but it actually can help you learn the system better as you test the system against any kind of training document. Okay, any questions? I thought I heard a microphone go on.
Can we hear from a couple of bureaus? It's been pretty quiet. I'd be interested to hear what people are feeling, and overwhelmed or supported.
So this is Cindy in, sorry, I'll turn my camera on so you guys can see me.
Thank you, Cindy.
I am just a little bit overwhelmed as far as I'm the program manager for the document control and centralized mailroom, and so we will still get paper claims and the medical records being sent into us, and no one has been able to give me a definite as to what any department is doing, like the activities and stuff like that. And so I did find, I guess, the quick reference guide on the document management portal, but it doesn't state anywhere. So how do we get the documents to so just because we haven't had training yet, and so I'm overwhelmed as far as, so who can we reach out to help us build these guides and these activities specific for our department?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one of the answers to that question is the individual mentoring sessions that where we'll be able to spend more time one-on-one. But the other thing I will say is anytime, even before that you want to reach out to the training team. And I know that the business analysts can help us as well to answer some of those questions, you know, the different areas that they're in charge of. That document management portal quick reference guide, I created it, oh, I don't know, about a month or so ago. And some of those things are still in process and in progress, trying to improve some of those types of quick reference guides. But I think one of the things you can do, do you like go by Cynthia or Cindy?
Cindy, please.
Cindy, okay, good to know.
Cynthia if I'm in trouble, but so
not by me.
Okay, thank heavens.
Is this, we're going to show you where to log some of your questions, and we want to keep track of some of those. And I know that Patty's documenting what you've said today as being able to, you know, follow up with you, but also in this questions tracker that Patrick created that we're going to show you how to access. We want you to be able to document your questions in there so that we can do research and we can reach out if we need to a business analyst, or if we recognize that we can help you build some of those activities, mentor you a little bit in how to create those. We've had, you know, experience in developing activities that are a little bit more end-to-end so that you can have a good starting point and have a good ending point. But we don't want you to feel like you're doing this alone or in a vacuum, because we have resources. Even if we as a training team don't know that particular subsystem very well, we can reach out to our counterparts from CNSI. We can reach out to our own Prism business analysts, and we can help with a lot of those different activities. Even if it means you want to learn how to read design documents, you know, we can help you learn how to do that as well for your particular area.
All right, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Cindy?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. And call me Dave. Same thing, you know. Someone's calling me David, I might be a little bit of trouble.
Hi, this is Audra.
Hi, Audra.
Hi, how are you, Dave?
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together for us. I really appreciate your time. I want to share my feedback, my personal thoughts with my program that I work with, ePass. So when I went into test initially, I couldn't get through a full test for the ePass. And I feel like the end-to-end task, like I can complete that what I'm currently doing right now. I think it'll be helpful, and I'll be able to put it like, I think it'll be easier to put it fully together when I'm able to get in and actually complete a test and see where the gaps will be that will be identified. So I feel like that's kind of my hold up here with this is like, I can list my current processes, what I'm doing right now, which I've already started, but knowing what the Prism functionality, like fully, you know, having that testing experience, being able to connect the dots there, that's kind of where my gap is for me at this point on,
Yeah,
on this project.
that makes sense. One thing I try to do, Audra, is if I can work on, so you're trying to, you know, when you start testing again, because I assume you are going to have to test some more, right?
I'm assuming, not sure the exact time frame on that yet.
Yeah. It looks like Gina's going to weigh in.
Dave,
I can see your eyes. I can see you wanting to weigh in. Go ahead, Patty and Gina.
Oh, no, Gina's going to answer it. I was going to answer. Go ahead, Gina.
Oh, it's just, and I don't have the detailed answer yet either, but I know that we as in the Prism test team is working to come up with the remaining schedule for all of the testing work that we need to finish between now and the end of the year, really, which will include all of the other areas of the system that haven't yet been tested. And so that schedule will be, Jen Maines is putting it together now. So in the next month or two, we will have those either like walkthroughs or what we're calling them like facilitated test sessions where BPLs, where business testers are attending a session where you're seeing some of that functionality and able to ask questions and see that it's working correctly. So those are coming up, Audra. So a little bit longer and you'll be able to see it in action.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all. That was just my feedback on this project and where I'm at with it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Audra. And I was just going to add to that is when you are back in there and as far as testing EPAS, I would, you know, of course, follow the test case, but also you can be creating your activity guide at the same time. And that's where I like to, of course, test or create your activity guides is at the same time you're testing, and try to, is that a bad expression? Kill two birds with one stone. You know, we don't want to kill birds, right? But if you can multitask and work on your activity guides at the same time, I know there's probably some time frames where you might feel some pressure also to get your test cases done. So we don't want that to be interfered with as far as getting your test cases timely completed. But even making notes and things like that, as far as when you're going to be able to create your activity guide from when you're testing, I think is helpful, especially where they've laid out some of those test case scenarios. And then you can leverage that and move some of those steps into your activity guide.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Okay, well, so once you've gone through your assessment processes, which is really those first two, then it's time to create and test those activities in the training environment, update your activity guides. And as I was kind of mentioning there with Audra's situation, you can do these things simultaneously, and even another one when you're doing your UAT test cases. And if we have time, we could probably talk a little bit more about leveraging your UAT test cases for activity guides. But before we do that, this is just an example of an activity guide, and it's really the same activity guide I displayed earlier. But as I'm going through and I'm looking at fields and I have questions, I will actually, create track changes in my document and use the comments functionality and just start documenting my own questions where I get stuck or where I want to see if, this is kind of an example right here, is if if it's not in a facilitator guide, if I've looked at the facilitator guide and it's not there, you know, then I might make myself a note here. It's like, this is not in the facilitator guide. Let me do more work on this to try to understand what this particular field means in Prism. So I will use my activity guides to just document as much as I can the questions I have and the places where I get stuck. So it says here, to help you, we have activity and facilitator guide templates, activity and facilitator guide examples. We've talked about individual mentoring sessions where we can really get more into the details and help you in more of your specific questions or where you're stuck. The questions tracker, like I've mentioned, I will show you where that's located. We as Prism trainers are assigned to subsystems to help you as well. This is an example of some of the topics that can be addressed in the individual mentoring sessions, and it is how to read and use design documents is an example of something we can do. Your progress in creating Prism training activities using the activity guide, Prism basics such as navigation, notifications, and list pages. Some of those Prism basics that we think that you've identified that you might need a little bit of additional help on, even maybe before you start getting into more details of the system. How to find data and how to submit a data setup request. So let me just take a moment just to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes data, usable data, is hard to find in the training environments, or maybe even UAT, as far as what, I don't know how to complete this particular activity because I don't have data that will work. Where do I find that data? In some instances, we might have to reach out to CNSI if we are also having a hard time finding data. But we can go through that process of how to submit a data setup request, but also we can show you how to use some of the list pages that are in Prism to help you also to find your own data. And then we kind of already talked about the last one, but we can also show you how to use test cases to create your own activities. Okay. Questions before we move on to the next little section? This next part is, you know, we wanted to be as helpful as we possibly can. We don't want you to feel like this is a burden as far as this task list is concerned, but we've created a task list to help you kind of keep track of where you might be at in the process of creating your activities. I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the live document somewhere, wherever it is. So this is the actual document we've created to help you keep track of where you're at in the process of creating your activity guides, your facilitator guides, and where you're at in relationship to doing your training at Go Live Training. Let me just do a collapse here real quick. So it's kind of broken down into four. Let me zoom in a little bit. Four major areas when it comes to your task. And the first one is assessing your team task. We've talked about this when it comes to distributing the end-to-end task analysis document to your team members. And we've included start dates, due dates, and before I get too much further, we've actually individualized this so you have an individual sheet for each bureau and teams within that bureau, so that you can work on your own task list as you see fit. Now, it's highly likely that we may have missed someone when it comes to a particular team under a bureau. So let us know if we messed up and we didn't have your team tab located on this spreadsheet, and we'll be sure to fix that for you. You may have noticed that last Friday I sent a link to you so that you have access to this spreadsheet. And let us know if you actually didn't receive that email and have access to the spreadsheet as a trainer. But yes, please let us know if we don't have the right name down in the tab for your area, or if we need to add one, we'll be happy to do that. But we have a timeline here of assessing your team tasks, which is this blue area, and we have the last task being due by March 4th. And really, this time here is really looking at all your assessment activities, whether it's you've decided to use the end-to-end task analysis sheet, or if you already know all of your tasks and you're just prioritizing what your tasks are from your existing business procedures. During those first couple weeks of February, we've kind of set aside that time to do a lot of your analysis. And then the last couple weeks in February is to prioritize those tasks and identify which ones you want to become Prism training activities versus ones that you know that a desktop procedure or SOP needs to be created. Oh, hopefully this is a helpful task list and not something that feels like a burden for you, but can help you see where you're at in relationship to the overall timeline of go live, and also before that instructor-led training. Go live training, which will be starting to be conducted the end of October. Sorry, let me scroll back. And the next set of tasks really are revolving around assessing your activity and facilitator guide, which we don't anticipate will take too much time, but we've set aside a couple weeks to go through the existing UAT activity guide and facilitator guides. And then the third section is really creating your activity guides, which is going to be the bulk of the work. And we have that really starting. And none of this is like, you could always start these tasks way earlier if you want to, but we've used this as a guide to make sure that you kind of stay on top of it so that by the time you're ready to train your coworkers, that you are comfortable in training them. And this goes through till the end of April. So that has a total of 38 calendar days. Of course, there's less business days than the calendar days, but this would take you up through the end of April. And our mentoring session, our individual mentoring sessions, like Patty mentioned, we've got those scheduled beginning in February. And was it the first part of March there? Some of them were going to start, Patty, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
First week of March, last week of February.
This is Audra again.
Audra, long
Just
time no here.
just voicing my concern with some of these dates and,
Yeah.
and testing dates kind of lingering out there still. We don't really know what those are yet. Definitely concerned with some of these due dates on here not having that date listed yet for testing.
Okay, we'll have Patty document that as one of your questions. And so here's another thing that is not actually in this timeline, is I have not included C4 training timelines yet, because obviously that material hasn't been developed yet, and we haven't started testing the C4 systems yet. So that's another thing that will be added to this for those of you who will be training C4 subsystems. That will need to be added to this document as well, and that will have a little bit different time frame, of course. But yes, when I took my first stab at this, the timeline, Audra, is recognizing that things would need to be adjusted. My suggestion, however, is trying to get started on it sooner than later, just for the mere fact that if you can get ahead of it a little bit before your UAT testing, that would probably be good. That way, when you actually get into UAT testing, maybe you've got some of those things done but also you might be better prepared for UAT when you feel more comfortable with creating an activity guide that you can do some of those things simultaneously as you're now getting into your UAT testing. I don't feel like I've explained this document super well, but let me talk a little bit more about it. So as you actually complete some of your tasks here, you can actually mark it as 100. And then I got this one marked as 50, and this one is 25. There's going to be a lot of transparency for this spreadsheet because your bureau directors and others are going to want to know how everybody's doing within your bureau. They want to see your progress. And so this is a document that you'll want to take an active editing role on and your particular tab. Again, if you don't think your tab is there, we'll add it. If you want to rename it, your particular tab, let's see what we got. I think we've got ePass there somewhere. I know I added it.
I don't know that you did.
I did add it.
But I don't know that you had time to put it on there.
I
But,
thought for sure I did.
Dave, did you, and maybe Patrick mentioned this also, and if so, then I just want to reiterate that if these due dates and this is getting overwhelming, to speak to your bureau director, because this information is going to be reported to ESC. And I think you mentioned that already, correct, Patrick?
Not in this session. That was in the first session. But yeah, to Patty's point, these tasks are meant to. We're keeping track of these as a means to show the bureau directors where their bureaus stand, not just by themselves, but in relation to, like Dave said, where we want to be throughout the process, and also to compare between the bureaus. But yeah, they will be communicated out in several different forums.
Let's see, there was a question there. Let me pull it up. It's from Chris. Is this document one that we all should have access to? I did not receive an invite to the Prism training mentoring session task list Google Sheet. Okay, we'll make sure we add you, Chris. And I'm pretty sure I added ePass to this, but I think it was my outdated document because I know I added it. So we'll make sure that Audra, that we'll add ePass here.
Yeah, and then also critical incidents, is that included in the waiver QA tab, or which one would that, or should that have its own tab and that needs to be added as well, or is that in?
We can add that if you feel like that needs to be added for sure.
Yeah, critical incidents for sure.
I need an MRB cases tab added. We have claims there for BEP, but there's no MRB cases. It's in PEGA. I don't know if that's why it didn't get added, but
these are all handled by Bureau. So tell me again, which
it's
one?
BEP, and it would be MRB cases.
Okay, MRB cases. Would you document that for me, Patty? Okay, so we've got that down. Laurel.
Yes. We also need critical incidents, ePass, and BMO. Okay.
Yes, so feel free. Anything that we're lacking, let us know, because what we have in addition, you might have noticed some hyperlinks up here at the top. We had a questions tracker. So that's the questions tracker that you can use, that particular hyperlink. It is a Google Doc that Patrick created. And let me just, I don't think we have anything in there right now, do we? But that hyperlink will take you to this Google Doc where you can go ahead and enter your questions or issues so that we can help keep track of that. I know the last meeting we had, Patty said that she's going to check on this document frequently. but also you can always email us and let us know that you have entered a question into this business trainer question and issue tracker. The other link I put in here, and I'll need to create a few more of these for SharePoint, but when you click all of these links here that says link to your specific analysis documents, those take you to the specific analysis documents for this area. And so we'll need to fix that for those three or four other tabs we need to enter. But when you click on that document, it'll take you into SharePoint, and it will take you to those analysis documents we talked about towards the start, whether it's the PDF version that you want to send out to people or the Word version, and then the spreadsheet you can use to gather all the responses from your various people that you're training. The other thing that we put in here is in activity guides. I've got a blank template here for your activity guide. And as you create new activities, you could leave them here in this SharePoint site and allow SharePoint to keep track of your activities. Also, as if we happen to create an activity for your area, we will drop those in there as well. And this was something that was brought up last meeting, is that if I'm working on something, I need to let you know, or so that you don't have to duplicate what I'm already working on. Any of the existing activity guides that I've created, I will be sure to drop in the appropriate area and let you know that they're there. Again, this is not a have to as far as this folder structure, but it'd be nice, you know, if we can kind of have some good communication on who's doing what on a particular activity. But as I mentioned, this was just a blank activity guide here. And then also facilitator guides. I have a couple of different facilitator guide templates that I've dropped in there. CNSI's UAT facilitator guides, they have them in a table format where they have a really small screenshot, and it's hard to really leverage and use those screenshots. In these templates, we've got updated examples of being able to put in bigger screenshots and being able to mark those up a little bit and draw your own attention to those in the facilitator guide. As I mentioned, your existing UAT facilitator guides and activity guides are in this C3 UAT, or sorry, C3 training resources folder, and you will find those, again, those activity guides and facilitator guides in those specific folders. And those are the ones you're going to be doing assessment for and leveraging and seeing what you can pull out of them and use those for your training. Let's see. Okay. What other questions do you have about this Prism Business Trainers Mentoring Session Task List? I didn't want to make an acronym with that, so I didn't. It's too long. Any other questions?
How do folks access that, Dave?
This?
Yes.
So we sent out an invite for people, so you should have received an email. And if you didn't, because I think like what Chris was asking is that if she didn't receive it, then I'll need to add her to be able to edit this particular document in Google Sheets. But once you have been given access to it, then you can just open it up through your Google Drive, right? Or that's where it'll be located, or Google Sheets, shared into Google Sheets.
Okay, Cynthia and Shelley Rivera did not get access to that. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that we add them to be able to share that here. And let's just do it right now, should we? Let's just do it right now.
Yes, please.
Loading. Okay, well, who do we got?
Chris Ramos.
Okay, there's Chris.
Okay, Shelley Rivera.
Is it with an E or right here? That's not right. Right. Oh, right here.
R-I-V-E-A.
That's
There we go.
her.
That's her. Okay, who else?
Cynthia Tate. And then we got a new person of Anna Velasquez, I think.
Hey, Patty, am I on that list? It's Tad.
Oh, you're on the naughty list, Tad. So that would be a different list.
Am I really on a naughty list?
No.
Okay.
We'll make sure that you're on here. It's just been too long since I've been able to chat with you.
I'm probably not typing Anna's name in right.
A-N-A, one N.
Oh, one in.
I have access. Thank
You do great, Anna. Thank you.
I have a question about the link to the specific analysis docs.
Check.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to have access to that link if we click it? Sorry if you already went over this, by the way.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yes, these are just links to SharePoint, so you should have access to SharePoint. And so if for some reason, you know, you didn't have access to the document, let me just show you how to access it from SharePoint itself. So if we take it from the top, if we go into training and we go into the business trainer document and resources, we have the C3 mentoring sessions folder. And then we have the different bureaus here. And then we've broken it down by some of these teams within the bureaus. Then once you click on that, it should look, they should all look like this, where you have the task analysis list and then blank activity guides and facilitator guides.
Oh,
Does that
okay.
help?
Yeah, that'll help. We'll be able to get to it that way then.
Yeah. So again, if we need to fix any of these tabs in here, and then we'll fix the corresponding folder in SharePoint, please let us know. You could even just shoot us an email, or if you have access to this task list, go ahead and enter that in the questions tracker document that we shared here in that hyperlink.
Anna was also asking a question how to get access to SharePoint.
Oh, okay. Look at me, I just assumed everyone had access to SharePoint. Yes, if you don't have access to SharePoint, Anna, we can work with you, but we might need to put in a request to remind me.
Would it be Rich Manning or DTS?
Rich helps us with Prism SharePoint, but Anna, do you have any access to SharePoint whatsoever?
I don't think so. I click on the link and my sign-in credentials aren't working. So
okay, all right.
I can share with my program manager or send the request.
So we will have Patty document that, and we will follow up with you to make sure you get access to SharePoint. Because it's important, but there's a lot of different things in SharePoint that you'll need access to. Are you going to be doing any testing, Anna?
You know what? I wish I knew. I just kind of was asked to come, but I assume I will be part of testing, so I would just need that access.
Yeah, because your test cases will be in SharePoint as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Also, Dave, Tad's asking if there's a master. Can you show him where the master list of trainers is, business trainers?
Yes, if I remember how to show that. So if we actually come back to the training site in SharePoint and we click on business trainer documents and resources, right here on that very first click is this Prism business trainers document. Well, let's just open that up and make sure I got the right document.
And this was something that we sent out recently to the bureau directors and assistants, just for them to kind of make any last minute changes, additions, or removals to that list. So it should be fairly up to date, but please let us know if there are people that you have identified that need to come off or need to be added.
Okay, sorry, that just came up. So yes, this is the list of C3 Prism business trainers here. I know there's been some updates, some deletions and additions here. And I think Tad, were you down here towards the bottom?
If I'm not there, I'm wondering what I'm doing in this meeting.
Well, first of all, we are happy you're here.
No, I'm happy too.
His name's at the bottom, Dave.
Oh, was I just blind?
My name's
Oh,
usually
right there. Well, look,
Okay.
Eric is kind of below you, so.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've got your name and under your bureau.
Okay, got it. I just wanted to double check that I wasn't like overstepping anything. I don't want, you know what they say about people who assume.
Yes. They're very smart. Okay, let's see where we're at. Okay. As far as our little PowerPoint is concerned, so yes, that's the Prism Activity Builder process. And before I turn the time back over to Patrick, I mean, that was a lot of information. Please, it's understandable if you feel overwhelmed in your particular area, but please just rest assured that we want to help. We may not be the expert necessarily in your subsystem or your area, but we are a resource and we kind of know who to reach out for if we don't know the answers ourselves, who to reach out to for help. The business analysts that are very helpful as far as answering our questions and helping us understand certain processes within the system. So please feel free to reach out. We're happy when you do. We want you to make sure you feel comfortable reaching out to us so that we can assist you in any way we can to help you prepare for go live training. It's a lot of work. I think if we kind of work together, we'll make each other's jobs a lot easier. Any other questions for me before I turn the time back over to Patrick? I feel like I left something out. I'm sure I did, but again, our individual mentoring sessions, we can really go into more detail. But even before that, before our scheduled individual mentoring sessions, we can work with you and help you get going.
Thanks, Dave. So I'll just kind of wrap this up with kind of a next steps and discussion about what we need to do next. So first off, it talks about starting your work now. Like Patty mentioned earlier in this meeting that she's already sent out invitations to the first individual mentoring sessions where it'll be your first opportunity to sit down with us on a kind of one-on-one basis or area with the Prism training kind of in that kind of a context. But in the meantime, hopefully you've got an idea of how to kind of start your end-to-end task analysis. Talk with your bureau directors about the end-to-end task analysis and make sure that you're keeping them in the loop on what assignments you're being given. Because maybe something I forgot to mention at the very beginning, testing and training are integral for us to go live on time with Prism. And so all the way from the top down, they've been pushing testing and training are a priority, because if we don't get those things done, then we can't go live. So it's very important. They understand the importance of it, but if you feel like you don't have enough time to do what we're asking you to do, get with your bureau leadership and discuss it, because they've been also told that these things need to be prioritized. So review and use the template to complete your end-to-end task analysis and ask us questions if you get stuck. And like David said, that can happen before our first individual session, but come prepared to talk about your end-to-end task analysis results in the first individual session. Next slide, Mr. Brady.
I have a quick question about the in task analysis.
Sure.
Is it okay if I renumber it because there's a whole lot of things that we do quarterly and that's not an option.
Yeah, absolutely. These are meant to be resources for you to use as you best see fit in your own custom individual training plans for
Cool.
people in your areas for go live. So absolutely change what you need to. It's all meant to just be a tool.
Thanks.
That's
Any
the last,
other?
that's the last slide. Sorry, Patrick.
Oh, got it. Any other questions while we have you? All right, just so you don't have them now, or maybe we've got some bashful people that don't want to say them in front of the group, but by all means, let us know if any of those questions come up. I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time and taking this seriously. Like I mentioned early on, there was a lot of discussion, but not a lot of details about what we were going to be doing as part of these mentoring sessions and preparing for go live training. And this is the beginning of it. And like Dave said, and Patty's been saying, you know, if we're all working together, collaborating, and we keep those methods of communication open, then I'm confident that we can get through this and have a very effective group of trainers to train their people. So if there are no other questions, thanks a lot for coming. We'll give you back some time.